You can define properties for components you create and make them available to be set via the property binding syntax by using an Angular decorator named input. Let's refactor the media item component to move away from the static content and support sending it a media item to display. We start with the media-item.component.ts file. We need to import the input decorator to use it. This comes from the Angular core scoped package, and we already have an import statement for that. The import statements support multiple import items in the curly braces separated by commas, so we can add input to the list. The input decorator is designed to be used on a class property. Let's create a new class property on the media item component class named media item. And we'll decorate it with the input decorator, placing the @input with the parentheses in front of the property. This will tell Angular that we want it to support any property bindings placed on instances of the mw-media-item elements where the property name is media item. Let's switch over to the app.component.ts file and make use of the new input property. The project code for this lesson has already been updated for the app component class to give it a first media item property set to an object literal with some sample data. We want to send this to the mw-media-item element, so we switch over to the app.component.html file. And in here, we can use the property binding syntax with our input name from the media item component. We use the square brackets and add media item, and then we set that equal to the app component property of first media item. In this syntax, the media item, which is the input property from the media item component, is the binding target because it is on the left of the equal sign. The first media item property from the app component is the binding source, which is to the right of the equal sign. When Angular parses the property syntax in a template, it is going to find either a match on a known DOM property name for an element or a property decorated by the input decorator on a component or directive that applies to that element. The DOM has built-in properties on existing elements. Components you create do not. That is why the input decorator is used, to give components properties that you want to expose for use when using the component. Now, if we flip over to the media-item.component.html file, we can replace the static name, watched on date, category, and year text with some interpolation syntax using the media-item.name, media-item.watchedon, media-item.category, and media-item.year binding sources. Looking at this in the browser, we can see the media item data rendered within the media item content. The input decorator supports passing in an alias name in the parentheses if you wish to expose the property name for use to be something different than the class property name. For example, we could switch over to the media-item.component.ts file and add the string literal media item to watch into the input decorator parentheses, and then switch over to the app.component.html file where we are using it, and update the property name to be media item to watch instead of media item in the binding target. This alias only affects the property name that is exposed for use by other components. The property on the media item component class remained the same, so we don't need to update its template markup because its execution context still knows it as media item. The input decorator is just telling Angular, hey, when you find a property binding with this name, map it to my component property of this other name. Or, if I don't give you an alias, just use my component property name. Now, even though Angular supports this name alias, it is a recommended practice to avoid using that approach by default. Think of it more as a way to solve scenarios that arise, and try and just use the class property name instead. So let's change this property back to media item in the template, and remove the alias back in the media-item.component.ts file from the input decorator.